Needs time to cure to attain maximum hardness. I mentioned it very briefly earlier on. Concrete will be dried quite fast. They are also called, there's also a concrete called quick drying concrete. They can dry within 6 hours, very fast. But drying time and curing time is different. Curing time meaning that you will let the moisture in the concrete to evaporate, and that will take up to months. On the surface, the concrete is dry, but there's still a lot of moisture inside. Why? Because one of the ingredients is water, right? So if you don't have time for it, the concrete to cure, to naturally ventilate and evaporate with the water, excess water content, the concrete then again will not be strong enough. Yeah, then you got a lot more problems. Problems like bubbling. I have a project before, the concrete wasn't done properly, there wasn't no time to cure, and then in the end a lot of bubbling. Everywhere you see bubbles and you can poke, yeah, and the water all flow up. So you must need time to cure. How long? It could be as long as 30 days to 60 days. It all depends on how thick you poke. The thicker you go, the more time you need to cure. Yeah? So for example, if the project, let's say a retail project you're doing, the client is only giving you 2 months to complete the project. I need to start operating, I need to start selling in 2 months' time, otherwise it's a pay rent. Then cast in situ concrete will not be ideal because it may take 3 months or more, or 2 or 3 months for the concrete alone to be cured. And during this time, you cannot do any other works. You cannot do your carpentry work, you cannot do your electrical work, and so on. But you don't have time. Then in this case, this format of cast in situ is not for you. Yeah, so time is another thing. So space and time. So if you cannot cast in situ, then what do you do? I'll give you another option later on. Okay, professional job is required. Next point, too much water, the concrete will not be dense or strong enough. Then again, too much cement, the powder itself, the concrete will then prone to cracking and shrinkage. Yeah? Usually gray color, or you can add color pigments to change the color I mentioned earlier on, except white. If you want the concrete to be pure white, you cannot add white powder to it. It doesn't work that way. The aggregate and the stone gravel chips has to be white. The cement powder has to be white. Then you'll get white concrete. Yeah? So because otherwise the gravel stone chips and the cement powder generally are gray. Even though you add white coloring, it won't work that way. So you want to get a pure white concrete, you must use everything white. Yeah? So you can see from this picture, very large scale, no joint line. The whole entire floor is one big piece of concrete. You don't see any joint line. So that's cast in situ. Yeah, you can pour it on site. Okay, now like I said, if the cast in situ is not ideal, I don't have time, I don't have space, what do? You can do precast. Meaning you buy it off the rack. These are pre-made in the factory in advance. But they will come in sizes, whether is it in the tile format, in the panel format, in the block format, they'll all be pre-made way beforehand. And they'll be left in their factory to cure for a longer period of time. So when you buy it, you're just buying the stock pieces. Then you can just quickly install it in your project without the need to cure it. Yeah? So that is the easiest and fastest way. The only problem is there will be joint line, like the tiles basically. So it's something that you need to mind. Yeah? You can take a photo, then I move on. I think roughly I mentioned most of it. So it looks something like that. So another advantage of precast, you can create design and pattern because they are cast on the mold. So your mold could have a pattern, and then you can get some more fancy design. Yeah, so that concrete doesn't look so plain. Of course, this is more decorative technique. It's something to add on. Some of the design, the joint line are less visible because it's integrated with the pattern. Some, like the one on the right hand side, you can see the joint line more obvious. Yeah. Some people don't like it, so it's up to individual. Like again, this one, the floor, the walls are all in concrete. The floor are concrete tiles, precast. The walls are concrete block, precast. That's why you see a specific size. Yeah? Does it make sense to you? In situ, large scale, right? But in factory, you can only make certain size, otherwise you cannot transport. Straightforward, right? Any question about concrete before I move on to the next one? I'm sure a lot of you have heard of terrazzo, but terrazzo is also a form of concrete, a more aesthetically pleasing concrete. Concrete, not everybody like it unless you're a big fan of Color Ando, for example. Go and find out who he is. There are some aesthetics pleasant to it, but some people find it a bit too raw, too utilitarian, and it's hard to live in, especially for residential homes. Unless your project is commercial project. So not everybody is a fan of concrete. But then you can consider using terrazzo. Many years ago, I would say in the late 60s, 70s, a lot of the HDB flats comes with terrazzo flooring. It's one of the cheapest material back then because they could not afford large slabs of marble or granite to be used at home. They actually buy terrazzo instead because it's cheaper. Yeah. Terrazzo, that's why they came up with this term. Terrazzo is also known as broken marble. Layman term. Your grandparents, my parents' age would say broken marble, meaning terrazzo. Yeah. So basically, what they do is they will get the off-scrape, the byproduct. That means in the stone quarry, when they cut marble or granite, there are a lot of stone chips been left over. Usually, they will just throw away. But now, because of the demand, they will not throw this away. They'll gather all these marble chips, stone chips, gather them, mix it with concrete, and make terrazzo, and then sell it to you. Same thing as concrete, it can be cast in situ, that means it's a large oval piece, or it can be pre-cast in factory, that means you're buying a tile size, possible. Both format of in situ and pre-cast are also available for terrazzo. Now, there is also terrazzo look-alike ceramic tiles or porcelain tiles, but they are not concrete. So there's two different types. Yeah? So if you're going to a tile shop like Hafari, for example, they do sell terrazzo look-alike tiles, but they are not concrete. So this one I'm referring to is the full concrete ones. Yeah? Concrete base with all these stone chips being added inside. Okay? So this stone chips could be marble, granite. I mean the latest version, you can even put it in some mirror chips, for example, or glass chips. Yeah? For example, some of these green dots that you see here are glass chips, so you can add some of these in. Like this. So the stone chips can be big or small, depending on what you are using, what kind of size you want. It can come in a variation of colors or be more consistent in one color possible. Again, depending on what you prefer. Yeah? All this could be custom made. Not expensive, except for the labor cost is high, especially if you're casting in situ. Okay? The demand kind of died down after a while, after in the 80s, nobody wants it because it's quite cheap looking after a while. And then maybe 8 years ago, I would say Valentino uses this for all his boutiques across the world, and they brought a new revival of terrazzo. Yeah, terrazzo, Chinese called Suimosi. That's the case you're wondering. So, become a new trend. Everybody is asking for this one. And you see this all over Pinterest, basically. So this is not in situ, you can see the tile size itself. Okay? So it can be bought pre-cast. You can even create interesting patterns like this to mix with other marble or steel, stainless steel, for example, into this. Yeah? I'm always advocating for using smaller pieces, leftover pieces, more sustainable. At the same time, creating your own design, manipulating the materials to form something interesting, instead of putting big slabs on the floor. Yeah? Countertops, all this is possible. Again, remember, it is concrete base, so you do require some kind of sealant, otherwise it will get stained. Yeah? Again, concrete and terrazzo, they want them to have some hairline crack because they expand and contract. So there will be some hairline crack to be expected. I'm not sure, I think this is still there. I'm not sure whether it's still there. This is in Bugis, not Bugis Junction, but Bugis Plus. Do you know Bugis Plus? In the past, it's called Illumina, and it's by Woha Architects, but I think it was bought over and changed the name to Bugis Plus. I'm not sure this is still there. So this is like terrazzo. But terrazzo, like I said, there is always some issues with cracking because of expansion contraction. this company or this supplier called Flowcrete, what they did is they actually used a resin base instead of concrete base. It's still with stone chips, but they use resin instead of concrete. Because resin is more elastic, so there's less issue with cracking problem. So they use that. If it's not there, then that will be a while ago. Okay, that's it. Then I'll go on to paint and plaster. Eventually we'll go on to paint and plaster. Any question about concrete and terrazos? Am I going too fast? Yes, I am going too fast. But any questions?
Is there homework?
All good? Okay.
Can we see the
Okay,
homework?
let's continue.
I can do the
So
job.
now we're going to talk about plaster. Yeah? So basically, plaster comes in two different types of form. It comes in the boards and it comes in paste. Okay?
Can you go back? Please.
Okay, so the type of boards, it comes in three different types. Okay, so basically the core will still remain the gypsum, the plaster in white color. But the surface that the paper that cover the both of the surface, it affect the properties of the board itself. So for example, the left one is the gray one. That one is it's so called as a gypsum board. Okay, the center one is the pink one, which is the fire rated board, fire rated gypsum board. Then the right side, the green one, the white one is the plaster board. Okay. So next, plaster board, or sometimes we call it as the gypsum board, or mainly used for the drywall construction. So if let's say you heard about this drywall construction, means you know that the wall most probably being built by this using plaster board or gypsum board. Okay. So the dimension again, as usual, is going to be this 8 by 4 feet. Yeah, 1.220 times 2440. Thickness can be various, starting from 9 millimeter to 12 millimeter. Okay. So for the left side, you will see that if let's say you use the 12 millimeter board for the partition, then the frame, it comes with two different price. Yeah, the aluminium studs, it comes with 50 width and 75 width. So for example, when you measure a floor plan, for example, right, you receive a floor plan for renovation project, and then you saw this wall thickness is only 75 mm, then you know already it's definitely a partition board. Yeah, it's a partition or drywall. But what about if let's say the wall and you measure 150 mm, what would the wall be?
Structure.
It's a concrete. It's a solid wall. Yeah, that's how you differentiate. Then if let's say you see the other dimension, which is 100 on the right side, yeah, then it counts as the partition wall. So that's how you determine. Because sometimes when you receive the renovation plan, especially the old one, it won't indicate the color correctly. Yeah, it can be like different line weight, very messy, and then blur. Then you have to gauge on your own. If let's say you receive the floor plan and you can do the side measure or side survey, that will be the best. But what if you cannot do the side survey at all? Means you need to roughly gauge already by the scale. Okay, so this is roughly the dimension. Yeah, so 12 plus 12 is basically two boards, and then 50, so it's equal to 75. And then this is the 12 plus 12, 75 plus this is just a tolerate, like a discrepancy, 100. Okay. Next. So plasterboard or gypsum board in the drywall construction is basically 75 millimeter, like the same as just now. But in between the gypsum board, normally we will install what is so called the soundproof. We can install soundproof. Okay. So by adding the rock wool insulation between the boards, it creates the soundproof. Because for this partition board or maybe the gypsum board, once you build into this drywall, it's going to be very hollow. When you knock, it's pretty much very empty. Yeah. So if let's say you build a room by using this drywall construction, basically you have no privacy when you're looking from in one room to the next room. Yeah, definitely the other room can hear what you talk. Okay, so for the new development, for example, the condominium project starting I think 2000 onward, the second room and then the rest of the division, the room division, they can use this drywall construction. construction because it's faster and then it's cheaper and yeah, you can modify easily. But the older versions, the older condo development, they tend to use the solid one, all solid. Yeah, either the brick wall or maybe the condo. Okay, you can just test if any of you stay at a condo development, you can knock on your wall and then you listen. Okay, for condo, usually it comes with the rock wool already inside. And then the soundproof properties, like how soundproof is it, depends on how thick the rock wool. Because it's like the rock wool, it comes with by like one piece by one piece. It's like fabric but quite thick. Yeah. So normally when you want to specify a drywall, the contractor will ask you how many grams, and then will give you option. So if let's say the weight is heavier, it will be more soundproof, but it's definitely going to be more expensive. Okay, again, related to the budget. Okay, so this is how the rock wool installation looks like. So basically, the partition will need these aluminum studs. Okay, so aluminum studs, the vertical one will be at least like 600 gap in between, and then the rock wool will position in between. So rock wool will have fire rated also that you need to consider. But mainly you need to discuss, you can consult with a contractor related to this rock wool. Okay? So this is just the sample of the studs or the aluminum studs. Normally it comes with the horizontal, the runner, top and bottom. And it comes with the vertical one, usually 600 gap. And then they have the safety brace. This one, the smaller one, that is roughly about 600 to 600 as well. Okay? So normally when you build the drywall construction, if let's say you have, for example, maybe cable, yeah, electrical cabling that you need to provide, you can run through inside the partition basically. Okay? But for electrical socket, for example, if let's say, I've got to build this wall, and then I want to put electrical socket, you have to plan in advance. At least the electrician will pull down like the wiring, and then they will have determined, and then they put it to the conduit. So it's safer. So cable not going to be just run through on its own like this, going down, and then you connect to the socket. No, you definitely have to run through it to the PVC conduit, run through inside. Then the rock wool will surround the electrical whatever conduit. Yeah, then it will be safer. If not, it's prone to the fire. Okay. So this is just you don't need to memorize this because normally the partition contractor have their own way to install. But this is just for your knowledge. If let's say you have an opening, normally the frame, the aluminum studs, they will install it in such a way. Okay. So this is like tentative, it's not cast in stone. This is just for your knowledge. But normally the standard one is about 600, 600. But sometimes if you want to make it more sturdy, then you can make it more dense. Okay. Then if let's say, for example, you have partition wall or drywall, and you plan to install, for example, TV, right? You want it to be wall mounted on the partition. What should you do? You will just drill onto the partition, install it. Does it work? So what should you do? Any idea? The first thing, if you plan, for example, maybe this surface or this partition, right? I'm gonna install my wall somewhere here. You need to highlight, emphasize it to the contractor. Okay, this is my drawing. I'm gonna install my TV here as a wall mounted. So the bracket position will be somewhere there. So what will they do? The contractor, the drywall or the partition contractor, they will prepare additional framing or the aluminum studs. Or they will also install plywood at the partition inside. Yeah, so they add the support. Either 9mm, 12mm, depends on what items they're gonna install into the partition. If let's say your installation, maybe the TV just the quite small one, not a very big inch, then they will just, maybe 9mm will be enough. But if let's say, I'm gonna install maybe wall mounted cabinet or something, get it heavier, then they will install more, the thicker plywood, and then they will add more support then it will be at least more heavy duty to support the things. Yeah. So that's the whatever that you plan for your design, you need to plan it in advance. So the contractor will prepare whatever the necessities for you. Because once for example, the partition built up already, and then I want to add things. Yes, they can still do, but definitely it will incur the cost. Yeah. So next, the plasterboard 9mm for interiors, mostly used for suspended ceiling, drop ceiling, and fall ceiling. So the partition board or gypsum board is not mainly just being used for partition wall, but it's also being used for ceiling. And then it's basically, we call it as suspended ceiling, or we call it as the fall ceiling or drop ceiling. Okay, why call it suspended ceiling? Because it's when you install this gypsum ceiling, for example, you need to install the framing and the aluminum framing as well. And then the aluminum framing is not going to be just right onto the soffit. No. Yeah, not onto the soffit. No. It depends on the height that you want to install. For example, I have this room and the ceiling quite high, and you have a lot of this whatever aircon ducting, and then you have the view. So what's the height that you want to achieve for this room? For example, I want to achieve 3 meters once it's clear from all this ducting. Right? So I don't want to see the ducting, and I just want to make it slightly lower. Then what should you do? Okay. Normally, you will need to install the aluminum framing according to the height that you want. Then, how can the framing hold on like floating? It's not going to be floating, right? So it needs to be suspended from the soffit. So they always have the hanger to adjust and like to hang the frame, then to hold this whole framing to be stable. That's why it's called suspended ceiling. And then why called as drop ceiling? Because sometimes the ceiling is not just like flat, right? You're going to raise it, is either you drop it. Yeah. So if let's say the drop ceiling means you drop it in certain heights. Yeah. For example, you have to create the flush ceiling 3 meters by going to drop the ceiling a bit. For example, to take some like certain design, then it's drop ceiling. Okay. Fall ceiling is basically the material, because these are all the fall ceiling. So the way how they call it, suspended ceiling, drop ceiling, fall ceiling, is quite similar, but it's a bit different in understanding. Okay. Then the next one, we will have these calcium silicate boards. So calcium silicate boards is normally we use for exterior. The looks will still remain, the same thickness. It comes with from the 9mm to 12. But if let's say for the calcium silicate, it's the different, it's still the board that you can cut easily, but it mainly used for exterior. So if let's say you have the bathroom, and then you want to cover up maybe the pipe, for example, in a HDB project, right? So normally, because it's gonna expose to water or humidity or moisture, then you can introduce this calcium silicate board to cover up the piping and at least it's clean. Yeah, don't use the normal board because it's gonna deteriorate very fast. Yeah, the normal gypsum board, which is not the waterproof one, it will definitely deteriorate very fast. So for the fall ceiling itself, if let's say you have like leakage or something, you will definitely easily create some sort of mark onto the ceiling. Yeah, because this material doesn't cannot withstand the water. Okay, but for calcium silicate, yes, it works. Okay, so this one, the gypsum board, it's in the gray color, fire rated board in pink like earlier, plaster board in white. Next, so this is what it called the fall ceiling detail. Like I mentioned just now, you have this this tool, they call it the ceiling flooring section. You have the channel, and you have this suspension rod. This is the one that from soffit down to the height that you want. Okay, so there's gonna be a lot of suspension hanger. Okay, and the dimension is pretty much between one flooring to another one it's something 1.2 meter times 600. So the board itself also comes with the 1.2 to 4 meter, right? Yeah. And normally for this design, I mean for gypsum mattress, it's actually very easy to cut and easy to. They will use like sort of like plaster, the paste plaster, to make it smooth and seamless. Okay. I'm not sure have you ever seen people installing the false ceiling before? Oh yeah. Okay, so basically they will install the frame and then the board underneath, because the board the edges sometimes will a bit like not really flat, right? Sometimes when they put it on the side and then the side can be quite wavy. So the plaster will help to smoothen and then make it all seamless. Then once you paint, as if you have no joint. Okay? The same with the wall partition. Yeah. So wall partition, you will see like for example like this, right? You see the unevenness. But if let's say if this is the gypsum board, I can use plaster and I can make it smooth and then seamless. Okay. This is the cove ceiling detail. So what's the meaning of cove ceiling? So normally when you do an interior design, we need to plan the ceiling as well. Then when it will show into your RCP. RCP is that your reflector ceiling plan. Yeah. So in reflector ceiling plan, whatever planning like lighting or drop ceiling or whatever design, it has to be captured into this reflector ceiling plan. So one of it is going to be the cove ceiling. Yeah, cove ceiling is the most common because designers tend to create indirect lighting. Okay. So for this cove ceiling details, you can this is just happen to be the E5 fluorescent, which is the old school, the tube, which is something like this. Okay, but nowadays people tend to replace this with LED light, which is the strip one. Okay, so for example, if your customer still want to use the E5 fluorescent, the gap that you need to allocate at least is 200 and 250 wide. Because fluorescent tube, you have to overlap it to avoid the dark spot. Yeah. So if let's say one fluorescent tube, then usually the joint will come with the black dark spot, which is not nice when you design, right? So that's why you need to overlap one fluorescent to another fluorescent. But for LED strip, you can go as about like 150 millimeter will be sufficient enough. But the drop from the ceiling, try not to get less than 150, because the closer you are to the ceiling, you will expose whatever defect that appear in the ceiling. If let's say unevenness, roughness, whatever texture, once you put indirect lighting, all will be exposed. Yeah? And then the lighting, for example, if you put the LED here and the distance too close to the ceiling, the lighting won't diffuse nicely. It will create a very hot, like harsh, hot spot on the ceiling, which is going to be very glaring. Okay, so try to keep it as like 250, but you can reduce to 150. But this gap, try to retain it within 150 to 200. Don't go lesser than that. And in some certain project, for example, maybe HDB, because the ceiling kind of low, but the customer want to have this cove ceiling details, they tend to say, oh, maybe I'll just use maybe 100 or maybe just 80 or 90 millimeter, right? At least I have the indirect lighting and use the LED strip. Yes, it can be done, but it doesn't look good because the hot spot will be very clearly visible. Okay, so please take note, yeah, this detail, they always have the upturn to hide the lights behind it. If you just do the straight one without the upturn, then normally you will see the lighting from the bottom. It's not going to be nice. Okay, so for cove detail, there are two different types also. The one that facing the wall, for example, there's a wall here, or this is just the wall position at the back. So it's just depend on the design. Okay. So this is just I mentioned just now, the LED strip light can go up to, as low as 150. This gap to keep it as like 200, 150 to 200. Okay, after normally about 50. This is the detail that normally interior designer need to do. Okay. Other than that, the plaster will come in the case form as well, which you normally see in a more classical design. Yeah, you will see this kind of cornice. Okay, so this detail we call it as cornice. Okay, don't say like I want to install like classical list something. Okay, but it's basically cornice. Okay, cornice can come with so many different type of design. Usually the supplier will have their own standard, but if let's say you want to customize, sometimes in some sort of supplier they can customize for you. Okay, basically the paste they will put into the mold and then we'll just let it dry very fast. Once they take out, you will see this kind of pattern. Okay, and this one, because the materials is basically the gypsum, so it's easily joined together and it can make it very seamless as well. Okay? And the cornice also comes with the central one, that is this more classical design. So yeah, feel free to explore your design. And for the design of this cornice, it doesn't mean only come in the classical design, but it also comes in the modern. So normally we tend to hide the LED and the light fixture inside the cornice. So you can utilize this to create a more modern design. Yeah, but remember the gap, keep it not close. You see this harsh spot cast onto the ceiling, and whatever unevenness onto the ceiling will appear. Okay. So other than the cornice, it also comes with the so-called architrave. Yeah, so plaster can be made as an architrave. What's the meaning of architrave? So it's basically an additional ornament that stick onto the main door frame or window frame. Okay, so it will show something like this. Maybe the standard door frame thickness normally 50 mm, right? But by using architrave, the frame will look more grand and it looks more luxurious, like if you have the dream project, for example, or the classical style one. Okay, so this one is called as the cornice and architrave. Okay, so for the am I first? Okay, so continue. Yeah. So for the plaster case, it can create the spatial effect plaster finish. Okay. Mostly used for the decorative purpose. It comes in a various names like Venetian plaster, stucco, polished plaster, texture paint. I'll show the picture later. But the disadvantages were the price can be relatively high because of the labor. I will show the picture and then we'll see why it is. Okay, so the disadvantages for using this plaster finish can be expensive, and then once defined, you need to reapply again the whole surface. Okay, but you just take take photo for this slide and then we'll continue. I'll let you know. Okay, the benefit is you could achieve whatever effect without the joint line. It's something like this. Okay. So this one is the standard way how they call it: trowel dash, travel dash, flat travel trowel. But it doesn't mean the name will just fix it. Depend one supplier to another supplier, you can have the different way how they call it as well. Okay. So basically, when we produce this kind of, for example, this kind of effect, and then you have, for example, maybe switch, right? And then we have to on off, and then so many people, especially maybe the public area. Then, not long after that, we will have the darker stain around the switch because our hand tend to have the heat. Then, for this kind of situation, you cannot just fix one part. The problem, this one you have to redo the whole surface. Okay, if let's say that part of the wall you need to fix, means you have to fix the whole part of the wall. You cannot just do partially because the color will be slightly different, the texture going to be slightly different. Yeah, so it won't match. Okay, and then again, if let's say to create this kind of effect, normally you will have the manpower, labor to do this kind of effect. Okay, again, if you have like a large surface and then this will be done manually, right? So this labor, why they called as the disadvantages because it's labor intense. And then this person have to apply all over. In compare, if let's say you want to create this effect with wallpaper. Okay, so wallpaper it comes in a roll, so you can just easily install. Once you have like problem issue with the grease, then you can just cut the part that have the effect, install the same wallpaper. But for this tradition plaster or this kind of effect, if you say you do the plaster, then you have to do the whole way. Okay? Any question? Okay, clear. So the other special effect will be this is what is called stucco wax. This is the Travertino. You can achieve metallic effect as well. Yeah, so the metallic is basically they will. Okay, I go for the stucco wax first. It's actually some sort of like wax, and then they're going to be the artists going to do this kind of effect. So because it depends on artists, the effect will affect based on the talent of the person. If let's say the person not really talented, you will see kind of like effect, a very fake effect. Yeah, so the labor will affect the result. Okay, for Travertino is something the metallic one. This is basically the plaster they mix with the metallic pigment, and then they will create this kind of effect. Okay. Next. So this is how they work. Yeah. So it require one or few manpower to work together, and then to create this kind of effect. So it takes some time to produce one sort of design. Okay. This is also it's considered as the effect, also the other effect. So you will see the different kind of like layer of like maybe metallic. You can mix with the other color, like maybe the darker beige to the lighter beige, or maybe light gray to something else. You can combine. They will customize for you. Yeah. So this work require actually for customization. Okay. Next, this is also some sort of like special. Sorry, clean. This is Western paint. Okay, you can do this kind of like patina. Okay, anyone remember what's the name of patina? The rust. What material? Copper. And brass. Okay, so you will see that this greenish effect. Okay, this is another type of like finishing. So you know that what can be achieved with this aftertaste. Okay. This is just the project.
Oh. This is one of the residential homes in Singapore, very big two-class bungalow house. The client wanted a very grand staircase, but in a very organic form. But because of the joint line of many materials, like for example, if I use marble or granite or onyx, even timber, there will be a lot of joint line, right? But because it's curved, the joint line not only you see the division, you will see a lot of staggering. It's not smooth. So we've actually recommended to use this Venetian plaster for the wall, for the staircase itself. But unfortunately, the lighting is not on, otherwise you can see the reality better. So actually, he actually quite first thought, just a paint, so cheap. But he was quite happy with the effect because overall it looks quite grand. And so something you can explore beyond your expectation. It doesn't always mean that expensive materials means expensive looks. Yeah, so it depends on how you want to apply it.
Yeah. So basically, whatever effect that you achieve by paste is actually seamless, normally seamless.
Yeah, there's no joint.
Let's go to paint. Any questions before I continue? Okay, let's go. So purpose of paint, I think everyone know already. Normally it's a secondary coating for primary surface. Okay. So the surface can be timber, metal, plaster, wall, ceiling, or structural methods. Okay. Next. So type of paint, they are water-based, or we call it emulsion latex, or solvent-based, or we call it as enamel, lacquer, varnish, bond very well to the plaster of concrete. Okay, so normal application, I think you've seen all over already, wall, ceiling, surface, yeah. So the selection colors come in the spectrum of color, yeah, for example, white from white to black, green also from lighter green to darker green. So it comes with so many range, yeah. And then the glossiness level, it can come in the matte means totally matte, etching, okay, like the ink, like the gel, and then high gloss. High gloss, I think everyone knows already. Okay, so maintenance relatively easy. However, due to its water-based paint, it tends to peel over time. I think you see quite a lot of building development. Some until a certain period, it starts to peel, and then government usually will send the landlord letter, it starts to pay. Or not, the reason we cannot find in Singapore. But I don't think other countries will treat it like that. Depends on what country. Okay? So common brand in the market, I think you know ICI Dulux, Ponting, Jordan. Yeah, that's the most common. But it's not only these three brands, there always have a lot of different brands in the market. Okay, even Raffles Paint, Sherwin Williams or something. Okay. So the variation can be done in texture. You can mix with sand, you can mix with the aggregate as well. So paint doesn't mean you paint at all. Yeah, but it's perfect. Then this is the water base. Standard line. You know it.
India is this add on something. Now this water paint is the most common paint you see in the market. What you use at home, for example, on your walls, generally they are all water based. There's another name for water based, for example, it's also called emulsion paint, it's also called latex paint. But they're all referring to a water base. Those kind of paint that once you touch your skin, for example, you can actually wash off with soap and water because they're water resistant. It also means that, like what Francis says, it's a peeling issue. There's another problem because water base, if you keep cleaning it with a damp cloth, the color pigments can be wear off after a while because they're water soluble. The more you clean, the more lighter the color will get. So just remember, water-based paint can also be called emulsion paint or latex paint.
Next. So this is another photo impression for how the color looks like. So you can be very, you can use the strong or contrast or dark or bright, right? So be creative with the design.
Another practical information that you want to understand. Earlier on, Fancy showed you the fan deck, right? Those are mostly the more unusual, the full range of colors, thousands of colors, instead of the usual booklet that you see on the paint shop. Some of these colors you see here, especially the strong ones, darker ones, you may have an issue of touching up. For example, what I mean, like contractors generally speaking, when they start to paint, they always paint a base coat. And then they come in with carpenter's work and whatever works and so on before they finally paint the final coat paint. But a special color like this or butter color like this, sometimes they could make an error, like a scratch or a chip. Then what they will do is they will just paint over that damaged spots. But because these color pigments are more unusual, under the light, these touch-up parts are very obvious as they touch up. And the color tonality is different from the general wall. So every mistake that you make on this kind of wall, you have to repaint the entire wall again.
I think the other room.
Huh?
The entire room sometimes.
The under room sometimes, because the color pigments can be very different, especially the darker ones. So you need to bear in mind. Even if these colors are especially mixed colors, you get a serial number from the pen deck, you go to the paint shop, you select this number you want, you will specifically custom made the color for you. And sometimes you even go back to the same shop, come get the same serial number on separate days, the color can also vary a little. So always go to buy extra for colors. You never buy enough, buy extra. Because you sometimes need to repaint the whole thing. So be very careful when you use strong colors like this.
Yeah. Even after you finish the project, normally you still need to keep the drum, yeah, the paint bucket. You don't throw it. Because sometimes after a certain period and you have defect or anything, at least you still have your paint there. And normally for the water, when we do this kind of like painting process, the painter have to close all the window, keep all the room clean without any dust. then you can start paint. Yeah, with the window open and then the wind blow something light flow in and then the color will start. Okay, so try to keep all enclosed, clean, no dust, and then start. Normally the painter will install plastic to cover whatever things that you have inside. For example, you install the built-in cabinetry, or maybe you have some sort of furniture inside already. Then normally the professional practice they will cover with the whole plastic. Yeah, and then they will seal it. They will seal it very well. If not, it goes to your furniture and then you're having difficulties with it. Okay, next we go for the solvent or oil base. So for this, normally it's opaque. I think before I continue to the oil base first, I go back to the water one. Okay. So for example, if you have projects and then you want to paint, normally, for example, like what Johnson mentioned just now, you choose from the pattern, or maybe you choose for the catalog. The standard catalog, I'm going to warn you something. When you use Nippon paint, the catalog is always off. Yeah? Can tell, it's always off. Because like even the color that they printed out in the catalog and the result, if you order the same paint, it will be totally different. So what you should do, when you want to introduce a paint, right, into a project, normally we'll choose like from the code and then get a small sample, paint into the project site with the proper lighting and the proper this is the room setup. You do the testing paint. For example, you paint 1 meter by 1 meter.